He's joining us today. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Steiny, Evan, great to be on with you guys.
Appreciate it. Let me start here. Kyle Shanahan's indicated that he's going to play the starters, or the plan is to play the starters tomorrow against Vegas. Do you make anything out of that, or why do you think that's the case?
I don't make a ton out of it because obviously you want to be able to get your starters out there in a bit of a dress rehearsal, get them prepared, kind of going through the motions for the season. So I don't necessarily have too much of an issue with them playing maybe the first quarter, 2 quarters. I think obviously with what we saw from the Saints, with Brock Purdy going out there with him and a couple starters on the offensive line, that was one where I was like, maybe, considering like the thought process behind that more so than, I prefer Brock to be out there running with the starters and Deebo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, Kyle Juszczyk, Kittle, the list goes on. I feel more comfortable in that instance more so than maybe, let's say, the Saints game.
Well, what did you make of the Saints game when he started without some of the other starters?
It was interesting because you could see it was a little disjointed. I know Kyle talked about how he was hoping to get one long drive out of Brock in that particular situation, but there was one instance where you had Brock almost take a helmet to the chin, but thankfully you had Dominic Pooney, who had the wherewithal to block 2 at the same time, that really was able to keep that defender off of Brock. But those are like the kind of concerns that you kind of think about in that particular instance. With Brock playing against the Saints without some of his starters, maybe guys aren't getting as open as you are accustomed to. And so thankfully he came out unscathed, no real issues. So water under the bridge at this point. But you could see some little concerns kind of pop up where you're like, oh, thank goodness the 49ers were able to get out of there without any injuries or anything like that.
Well, Brad, it feels like, another day, another rumor. I think BA was linked today, I don't know, to Washington. The other day, it's Pittsburgh. It's getting kind of tiresome at this point. I'm just kind of curious where you're at in regards to, I don't know, these contract negotiations in which there doesn't appear to be updates, or when there is an update, it's not much of an update. Where are you kind of at? Where at with this thing, specifically with BA, and how much does it impact the way that you're looking at this season and just kind of the vibe right now of the 49ers?
Yeah, it's been one of the more interesting situations that I've been a part of, obviously covering the San Francisco 49ers. And looking at the whole situation, it kind of feels like the entire NFL has Brandon Aiyuk trade or negotiation fatigue at this current point. So I even have like a bit of a running joke, on Twitter that I'm collecting a nickel for every time a rumor or a report comes out. And I have a whole jar full at this point. It's pretty amazing. So I think with where we're at with that, we know that it's a little detail that is keeping this thing from coming across the finish line. And so we're just in a waiting game, and pretty much everything else that's coming out feels like speculation, just based on the fact that we don't know. We don't know where this is headed. We don't know how it's going to finish. We assume it will end with Brandon Aiyuk signing a long-term contract with the San Francisco 49ers. But the question now becomes is when will that happen? And will there be any carryover into the season? Will there be any rust? Obviously, we know he's been holding in. He's been in the facility. He's in meetings. So that's a positive sign. But as we know, these guys need to get out there and they need to get on the field and build up that callus that comes along with playing padded football. And so the overall feeling is just hopefully that something breaks soon, because I'm not sure not only 49er fans, but anyone who works, whether in media covering the Niners or nationally, really feels like dealing with the situation much longer. But the thing with Trent Williams, too, kind of in that same category, at least the tone with that has been more optimistic. And we do know that Trent is a unicorn. He is one of the GOATs at the position of left tackle. So we know that's a guy who takes a lot of reps and days off in training camp to begin with. So there's less concern there. And so the hope is that the 49ers can take care of both of these guys, because they are going to be key pieces if they want to return to another Super Bowl.
Brad Graham joining us on 95.7 The Game. Check out his YouTube channel, SF Niners. He's joined us before, and we love his insight. Let me ask you about a little personal question about how you'll watch tomorrow's game. So you watch tomorrow's game against the Raiders. Let me just ask, do you go into the game looking for something specific, or do you watch it the first time and kind of get an overall grasp of what you saw and then kind of dissect some specifics about the game itself?
For me, especially like for preseason games, I'm more looking for like back-end roster competitions, like who do I think is going to get that last wide receiver spot, or who's going to get the last cornerback spot. Those are typically the things that I'm looking for and putting a lot of weight and emphasis into. When it comes to the starters being out there, you just want to see some rhythm, especially from the offense. You want to see that these guys are rolling and that there's not a lot of disjointed plays or things of that nature, and they just look good out there, and that's hopefully what you're looking for. But for me, I just kind of watch the game as it unfolds, and I'm big into breaking down the all 22 after, so that's when I get really granular with watching these preseason games. But for Friday's game against the Raiders, I think the main things you want to look out for is health. You want to see these guys in some form of a rhythm with the starters being out there on the offensive side, and defensively, if we get the starters, it'll be the first time that we potentially will see Leonard Floyd, Hargrave, Malik Collins, Nick Bosa, new defensive front. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. I don't put much weight into wins or losses of preseason games. It's more of an individual player evaluation for me personally. But again, holistically and high level view, you just want to see that you get out of there without any injuries and they look in some form of rhythm.
Well, Brad, I'm glad you brought up the defensive line, because it does look a lot different than it did specifically, in the middle than last season. And last season, look, they were 26th against the run, obviously against Green Bay. Detroit not look great on the ground in the postseason. I guess if you were to identify a part of this defense that is that you want to improve, is that it? Because I'm looking at a secondary that appears to be a lot better, a lot younger, much more athletic. I know that Dre Greenlaw is out, but the linebacking core should improve over the course of time once he returns. Has the defensive line gone from being the unequivocal strength of this team to the one that you might be the most concerned about?
I think if you're going to talk about concerns with the defensive line, you're more looking at kind of back-end depth, because with what we've seen from Leonard Floyd in training camp, I mean, he's as advertised, the length, the power, the speed. You can tell that the combination of having bookend Bosa and Floyd together is going to do wonders. I really do believe that. And with what we've seen from Hargrave coming into camp in great shape and what we've seen from Malik Collins, this actually does look like a front that will be able to cause a lot of havoc. And I really think that Floyd could be one of those missing pieces of just having bookend speed on the opposite side of Nick Bosa for the first time really since D Ford was out there back around 2019. So there are a lot of positives. And also, too, you can't forget about Yetur Gross-Matos, another addition from free agency. I asked Nick Bosa about his fit into this rotation, and he says he has a ton of upside. The thing with him right now is just trying to grasp the wide nine scheme that Chris Kosuric is so famous for. But he said that they've been on him and they've been really getting him into that mix. And Yetur is a guy who can play inside out. So he can rush over the guard. He can kick out. He can play base down edge. So he can be your Charles Omenihu 2.0, your Arden Key type. And I really liked what I've seen from Jordan Elliott, a newcomer from the Browns. I think, again, if you're looking at concerns, it's like you have Robert Beal, who's young and unproven. You don't have Drake Jackson coming through that door anymore, as he's going to be on IR with the knee surgery. So the concerns more come from, I would say, back-end depth. But I am very intrigued by the pieces that they've brought in and what we've seen from this group so far.
Brad, the one thing that Kyle Shanahan said Tuesday, I believe, he was asked about Jacob Cowing, who had a pretty good game against the Saints. And he said, he did fine as a punt returner, but that, he's behind, which was, which kind of stuck out a little because he looked pretty good. So my question is this, is if a guy like Cowing is behind, where are we right now with Ricky Pearsall? Do 49er fans have a reason to be concerned about where he's at and his injury?
Yeah, those are two guys that have just been dealing with the injury bug all throughout the preseason training camp. Obviously, getting to see Jacob Cowing and what he's capable of, that's really promising. And two, he missed a lot of training camp, but the first day back in pads, he had a touchdown, he had an acrobatic catch, he was making plays. Jacob Cowing just strikes me as a playmaker. I had the opportunity to scout him before he was drafted. I spoke to him at the combine. He's a playmaker. He's wired the right way. Even though he's only 5'8", he plays much bigger than he is. So with Cowing, that's a guy where stock is up on him for sure. And I've seen a lot of the concerns about Ricky Pearsall. Obviously, you have a guy who's a first-round draft pick. The thing with him is he's had 3 injuries since being drafted by the 49ers, but in his college career that spanned over 5 years, he didn't miss a single game. So it feels like a little bit of bad luck for him. And with what I've seen from Ricky Pearsall in training camp, you see the suddenness. You see his ability to run crisp routes. He's got good hands. Obviously, with a rookie who's learning a new playbook, learning a new quarterback, learning the whole just NFL in general, there's a lot coming at you. So you want those guys on the field. But I think in the long term, as long as Ricky Pearsall can stay healthy, and as we know, the best ability in the NFL is availability, if he can just stay available, I think he's going to be just fine. But right now, that's the concern is when is he going to be back? Is he going to miss any regular season games? Because I know 49er fans are chomping at the bit to see Ricky Pearsall in red and gold.
Yeah. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, that's Brad Graham. Check out his YouTube channel, SF Niners. And don't forget all guests on 95.7 The Game.